Start?
Yes.
Great. I will begin. Thank you for tuning in to our presentation on street art and copyright law, a very important topic that there are a lot of misperceptions about and confusion, what people can and can't do, what rights artists have, what rights business owners have, and we are here this evening at the People's Building on beautiful East Colfax in the Aurora Cultural Arts District to talk about that tonight. I'm Meredith Badler. I'm the Deputy Director at the CBCA, the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts. We do a lot of things at CBCA, from advocacy to research and training, arts engagement activities, but one of the things we do is provide professional development, business skills, and accessible legal services to artists and creatives all over the state. We do that through a program called Colorado Attorneys for the Arts. And tonight, CAFTA, Colorado Attorneys for the Arts, has partnered with the amazing Colfax Canvas Mural Festival. It is coming up the first weekend in September. And it is going to be beautiful. They're going to paint incredible murals for their second year in a row here in East Colfax. And given that topic, we thought, what a wonderful partnership to share some legal advice, specifically about copyright law and how that interacts with street art. So that's our partnership here today. We at CBCA and CAFTA are big fans of the Colfax Canvas Mural Festival and all the wonderful arts and culture they have going on here in East Colfax. So check out CBCA. We have lots of other upcoming events and workshops. This presentation will be recorded. Maybe you're watching it now live on Facebook. If you are, put your questions in the comment section. We'll be watching that and asking them as we go. If you're watching this later on YouTube or through CBCA's resource page, hello to you, and we hope you find tonight's presentation helpful. It is my deep pleasure to bring up our speaker for tonight, Dave Rhine, who is an intellectual property attorney. He's also a volunteer in our community. He works with a number of cultural organizations. And this is a topic I know is near and dear to his heart. And he has a lot of good information to share with us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Hi, everyone. Good. I'm glad you're able to join us. And you heard from Meredith about what CAFTA can do for you, as they say. And I will just relate that we had an artist that approached me and said, will you help me with some contracts? And I said, absolutely, but let's go through CAFTA, and worked with Meredith, and Meredith got the artist set up right away. We worked on the contracts, and if you were to drive in the 40 West Arts District, there's a number of buildings, apartment buildings, that are decorated with some fantastic murals, and we were able, in a very small part, to allow that to happen, allow the creative juices to flow and make the district that much better. So do look into the Colorado Attorneys for the Arts before you sign a contract, not after you sign the contract. We'll help you after you sign the contract, but it's always easier to solve a problem before you sign that contract. So do take a look at that. The price is right, as they say, and I think you'll find that we can help a lot of different issues for you. So one of the issues we're supposed to be trying to talk about and trying to help you work through is street art and graffiti, which all deals mainly with copyright, not exclusively with copyright, but it's an area where I think most of us think we know what copyright is, but we don't really know what copyright is. I mean, if you're sitting in your room or your office and you look around and you have a book, the cover art is protected by a copyright. The words inside the book are protected by a copyright, but it still doesn't really tell us what it is. Copyright protects how we express an idea, not the idea itself. So if we want to write a book about kids going off to a boarding school, turns out they have magical powers, they have to fight forces of evil. It sounds a lot like J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series of books, right? We can write those books, we just can't use the characters that J.K. Rowling's created, we can't use the dialogue. We have to come up with our own, how we express that general idea of kids coming to age, going to school and fighting forces of evil using their magical powers. We can write that. It's not the idea, but how we express that idea is what's protected. And really all we need, it's very simple, some level of originality. If you're already doodling because you're bored already, that doodle is protected by copyright. I can't peer through the camera. I can't peer through the camera, but if you were to show us through the camera what you've doodled, we can't slap that on a t-shirt or a mug or anything else and sell it without your permission. You own that doodle, if you will. You're a person, so there's the authorship, and it's a fixed, tangible medium. As long as I don't tap dance, my wife has threatened my life. If I should ever dance in public, especially something that's being recorded, I shouldn't do that. But if you are tapping on your keyboard, you're writing with a pencil, or you're doodling with a crayon or pastels, or you're starting to spray on the side of a building, hopefully with permission, and we'll talk about that in a moment, then that's all protected by a copyright. So very simple. You don't need to register it for it to be a copyright. We'll talk about why you want to register it, but it doesn't need to be registered with any official office in order for you to get the protections of copyright. Now, it's different from the actual thing itself. If I was to make a doodle right now, and normally I would, but since we're kind of on camera here, it might not quite work as well for that. The object that I create, well here, Meredith was kind enough. Wow. Okay, so she's seen me do this before and just said, Dave, you're terrible. There's a reason why you're not an artist. I don't know if you can see this. This is fantastic, right? So this piece of paper is the object itself. And so Meredith can make even more creative works if she wants to. I know I'm breaking the cardinal rules of going in and out of camera here, right? So this is the object itself. It's not the copyright. The image, the expression can be plastered in a book, it can be put on a mug, it can be copied over and over and over again. So, but it's not the object itself. If I was to sell this to Meredith, who you just heard from, for $1, which would be really cool, right? Because she created it and she's giving me $1. How awesome would that be? But if I was to sell this image or this piece of paper, I've only sold the object itself, not the copyright. The artist, in this case Meredith, still owns the copyright so I can't recreate it. No one else can recreate it without her permission. And that's really the essence of what copyright is. It's not short phrases and words, and I mention that because people ask me about tagging and about some phrases that might be incorporated into works that they might do with the murals. The short phrases themselves are not protected, but the entire work that includes the short phrases absolutely can be. But if you were just to make some catchy phrase and write it, that's not protected by a copyright. It might be protected by some other thing, but we're not going to get into that today because I have to put my kids through college. So you'll have to pay for that. Just kidding, but that is another presentation. So one of the things we aren't going to do is judge your artwork. Unlike Meredith, who judges my artwork and says, Dave, that is terrible. And she's absolutely right. My kids would agree. Everyone would agree. If you were to see what I would create, you would agree. But whether it qualifies as good art or bad art in terms of quality or any other characteristic, we aren't going to judge. It's still protected by a copyright. Now, one of the things as muralists or street graffiti art, you have extra protections that not all artists have. So in our audience, very few people today, is someone who would claim to be a performance artist. Actually, we have two people who would probably claim to be performance artists. They would not have the protection that I'm just about ready to talk about here, and that's called the Visual Artists' Rights Act. Sometimes you might hear that as VARA. And this is an important concept to get, because if you ever enter into a contract to create a mural or street art, you're probably going to see this term. So I'd like you to know what this is before you sign the contract. Remember, we love for you to understand what it is that you're signing, or talk to us before you sign things rather than after the fact. And what it does, it's really cool. It gives you certain rights, such as the right of attribution, which just simply means, hey, if you're going to use that, you have to tell the world who created that. Or, you know what? That was so terrible. I don't want my name to be associated with that anymore. So, for example, maybe you were early in your career and you thought something was really cool. Years later, you say, no, that was actually kind of lame. I don't want my name associated with that anymore. Under VARA, you would have the right to do that. The bigger issue as muralists is this next piece, and that's the right of integrity. You have the right to keep your work from being mutilated, destroyed, changed in some ways. And these are lifetime rights, unlike copyrights, which have a limited time period, although they're a rather long time frame. Under VARA, they're lifetime rights, and that is really helpful. I'm going to just talk about a couple cases. Not that you need to remember the cases, but I want to really illustrate some of the limitations and some of the cool pieces of VARA that can be used in your favor. So one of the things that VARA requires is that it has to be for visual art. So as muralists and street graffiti, we qualify. Other art forms may have some difficulty with that. It has to either be a single piece, or if you're going to have multiple pieces, then it has to be numbered. Sometimes you might create a painting, if you will. It might say one of however many. As long as that one of the number is 200 or under, you would potentially have rights under VARA. And it has to not be a work for hire, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and it can't be for an ad or a promotion. And that ad or promotion can actually be rather extensive or broadly construed, if you will. There was a case in which you can see the little poster banner, if you will, that was created underneath there. It took them, I'm going to say, 100 hours. So it was actually longer than that to create this. It was to help get people to right to counsel, and there was another campaign that went along with it about voting rights, and someone destroyed it. And so there was a lawsuit, and the court said, you know what, this was really just a promotional, and this was an advertisement. So it doesn't get the qualifications of VARA. You're not going to get those protections. So you want to make sure that it's really not for a commercial purpose, really. You don't want it to be considered an advertisement or some sort of promotional, even if that promotional activity is something like, hey, get out there and vote, or wear a mask, or wear eyeglasses. I don't know why you'd say wear eyeglasses, but if for some reason somebody wanted to pay you to create that, more power to them. Just know that you're probably not going to get VARA protection. Now, does that mean that you don't have copyrights? No, you still have copyrights. Think of VARA as this extra level of protection. So you have copyrights to keep other people from using your works and to be able to have exclusive uses of it. And then there's VARA rights, which gives you that right to keep other people from mutilating your work, or to make sure that you get the credit for your work and have your name put on it. So one of the things I get questions about from artists is, what if I painted a mural and I didn't have permission to paint that mural on the side of the building? Well, first thing is we have a strong conversation as to why that happened and what could ever lead to that happening. But if you look at the history of street art and murals, there was never permission given, right? I mean, even Shepard Fairey, right, and Obey the Giant, and some of these, what we now think of as godfathers of the movement, they were tagging and putting stuff left and right, and police were always after them, trying to figure out who was doing this, and to arrest them, frankly, for spray painting on public property. And so to some folks, still, the idea of getting permission before putting their artwork up is still an anathema. And the issue then is, okay, what rights do I have? And I would argue that, and there's not a case that would support me yet, but I would argue that you have copyrights. So if you went out in the middle of the night, kind of like a Blansky or Bansky, and you made something really cool, but you don't have the name that he does, and so everybody appreciates the fact that you spray painted on your building and made your building worth so much more, you have copyright, so you can keep other people from reproducing that work, but you don't have borrow rights. And under this case here that is up on the slide without going through it too much, they didn't have permission, or at least one of the artists didn't have permission to spray paint and create their mural. And the court said, no borrow rights. They didn't address whether they had copyrights, and that's why I still argue that the artist still retains the copyright. Nobody can reproduce that work and make money off of that artist's work. If that's you, then no one can make money off of your work without your permission. But you don't have borrow rights. You don't have the right to say to the business owner, hey, I spray painted that in the middle of the night, so don't go whitewashing that and covering it up. And if you didn't have permission, then you shouldn't expect for that to still be up there. And then the other piece that comes up with this is sometimes works of art get moved, and even graffiti art and street art gets moved. It's not always on a non-movable building. You say, Dave, I can't picture that ever happening. Trust me, it does happen. And if we think of it like the Wall Street, in New York City, the Wall Street Bowl, there was the fearless girl that was put in front of it. And the person who created the bowl was upset about that and said it changes the entire message of what I created by when they put that sculpture next to mine. Frankly, that's a little bit of a hypocrisy because I don't think he originally had permission when he first put his bowl up, and it became an institution, and I think it's moved around. I won't swear to the entire history of all of that, but the fact that nobody can see your work doesn't mean that VAR rights have been somehow violated. As long as they don't mutilate your work, change your work, destroy your work, that's okay. And under this case, one of the murals was basically, there's a building that's going to be built right next to the mural, and it would be pretty tough to see that mural. And the artist, understandably, was upset about that. And the court said, we understand why you're upset, but you don't have a right to complain under VARA rights here. So here's the big case that everyone talks about. And this is the 5 points, and a lot of people understand that at one point in time, this was a worldwide destination. This is a place where if you were really good or were really trying to break into the scene, this was a great place to have your work seen. The issue came up with you had a number of warehouses and just a complex of buildings. Nothing was happening there, and the owner of the building went to a muralist, and I think in the case they described him as an aerosol artist. Times have changed. We describe folks a little bit differently. We just call you artists because that's what you do. You create really cool stuff. And said, hey, I will let you create stuff here, and I will let you be basically a curator. Have people, you decide who's going to spray paint here. And it became this big thing where the person who became the curator, if you will, he created spaces. This is the space where your artwork is going to get spray painted over and recreated by other people. And over here, some of the better pieces of art, or some of the I don't know that Shepard Fairey ever painted in this area, but if there was a Shepard Fairey painting there, it would have stayed up there for a while. Kind of like in the Rhino District. I know things aren't happening this year, but Shepard Fairey's painting is probably going to stay up there for a while. Other art gets spray painted over and over again. So there was permission. This became a destination place. And then at some point, the owner of the building said, I think I'm ready to sell. Or someone approached the owner and said, I'll give you a pile of money and sell the place, but this artwork has to go. And there was a big court case. The judge said, I'm not going to keep anybody from doing anything yet, and I'll issue an order shortly. And before the judge issued the order, the owner had the building, they started removing the artwork by painting over it. And over time, all of the artwork was removed. And guess what happened? He shouldn't have done it that quickly, because the judge said, one, we think that was a bad intention, and we're going to hit you pretty hard on damages. And awarded $6.75 million to various artists for destroying the work. So VARA can be very powerful, and because of that, well, not just because of that, but also because of that, it's gotten a lot more attention with landowners. And I will tell you that most contracts where paintings or murals are being painted on sides of buildings or any other place, there's a contract that among the terms in there says, here's a VARA waiver. And basically what that's saying is, you artists are giving up the rights that you have under VARA. Remember, that's the right of attribution and the right of keeping the artwork from being destroyed, mutilated, and that's the time. And most of the time, there really isn't much that you as an artist can do about that. You either have to agree to the waiver or you don't get to paint. But there are things that you can do. You can put in there, and a lot of times most landowners are agreeable to this, is you can say, well, if I'm able to remove the artwork from the building without destroying the building, and sometimes depending on how it's applied and what's going on with the building, and maybe the building's going to be removed and just flattened. And so then it's easier to actually remove it. Vansky? No. Shoot. I can't remember the name of the artist. There's an artist who does whimsical characters. Usually they're very colorful. There's an exhibition here in Denver where he had painted something in a, I want to say like in a Boys and Girls Club. It wasn't a Boys and Girls Club, but something like that. To kind of, make the place more cheerful. And then when the building got sold, part of the sale of the building was we get to remove this artwork, and it's on display in Denver for the first time since it was removed. So some of these pieces of art can actually be removed. And you can put that in your contract. You say, I would like, if it's possible, I should have the opportunity to remove it at my expense and be able to sell it or do whatever it is that you want with it. I have next to the 5 Points building, you'll see the Statute of Roosevelt, and some of you may remember there's some controversy. It was displayed in a prominent museum in New York, and the setting and how it portrayed American Indians and others was not up to the times, let's just say. And so they wanted to move the statue somewhere else or just remove it altogether. And under VARA, that would be difficult. VARA didn't apply at that point in time because it didn't exist at the time this was created. But if it had, VARA would have made it more difficult. And so sometimes moving the artwork to another location, you can put in there, hey, that's okay, but I should be consulted and with some meaningful say, not just, hey, what do you think? Oh, I don't think you should move it there. I think you should move it over there. Oh, well, the contract doesn't say how much we have to listen to you. So we put some language in the contract about moving that work. And then next to that is maybe a little difficult to see. There is a sculpture, and over time, air pollution, acid, other things had made the statue less than desirable, and they sent it off to someone to restore it, and it came back, I don't know, my kids could have done a better job, I think, than that. And so you can say, hey, yeah, sometimes artwork needs to be touched up and repaired, especially paint, right? It fades over time, it chips, things happen. And so if someone is going to repair it and fix it up, then I, artists, should have the first right. You should hire me to do that work. And so some of these things that are captured in VARA, even though we're waiving our rights, we can, on the other hand, things we care about as artists, we can put back into the contract that the landlords can still live with. So it's not the end of the world, like, oh, I can't believe it. Dave told me not to sign away my VARA rights. I did not. What I'm saying is if you do sign away your VAR rights, think about what rights you can add back into the contract so that everybody can live with. And I think if you come away with anything from this, come away with that it's okay to sign away your VAR rights. Just think about what is really important to you and what do you want out of it. All right, so when you're creating your artwork, what is it that you can use? What can you incorporate in the mural without getting into, let's say, a lot of trouble? So in this, if you were here, and I hope you will come for the art festival in September, this is a fantastic piece of work, but I'm going to mispronounce his name. I'm sorry. Hierro Viega. I apologize if I mispronounced your name terribly. Very sorry. But it's a fantastic piece of work. And so in preparing this presentation, I asked, hey, I asked the Colfax art community, can I use this work? And the answer was absolutely, just make sure you give him credit. And I've done that. But I don't think that's enough, because unless he has assigned the copyrights to Colfax Canvas, then the next step is you have to ask the artist, which I did through Instagram. And we have a little bit of an exchange here, and I just simply said, hey, I'm going to give this presentation. And he says, yes, you can use it. It can be as simple as that. You don't necessarily need a long, drawn-out contract with indemnifications and all sorts of other things. If you just have a simple email exchange or an exchange on social media, getting permit, make it very clear as to how you want to use the work, identify what the work is, and ask. I would say most artists are very agreeable. So it's not just the people who create the final work. Perhaps there's something that you want to use. So for example, if this purple donut is not original, and you see that in some other work, go ask the artist, hey, tell him, I'm making this cool mural as part of this deal. I really love this donut and what's happening here. Can I use that? Or, when we'll talk a little bit more about rights of publicity, I don't know the person who's depicted here. We would probably want to ask permission from this person before we create our mural. Say, hey, I love everything about what you stand for, and I want to create a mural that's going to honor you, and here's kind of what I'm thinking about. Can I use your image in there? And even if this is what you have, this exchange on social media, then that should be enough. But think about who might own copyrights. So certainly the Colfax canvas probably has some rights, but they probably don't own the copyright. They probably just have the right to use the copyright for a limited purpose. And maybe they have the right to grant me permission to do it, but on the safe side, I asked the artist. And you should too, if you're going to use something from another artist. To give you maybe a little over-the-top example. Street art, murals, for the last 5 years, maybe even longer, through today, are like the coolest piece of art that commercial groups want to be a part of. In other words, I'm a Banana Republic, or I'm American Outfitters, or I'm The Gap, or anybody else, beer commercials. They all want to incorporate your artwork. Why? Because you do such an awesome job. You have this talent that other people don't have that will help sell the product. And in this case, on the right, with the red background, is the actual artist. And he created both pieces of work. But one of the American Eagle decided to use this artwork that this person created. And in fact, in one of their ads, they put this other person that's in with the blue, and it almost seems like that person's the actual artist, which is kind of like a double insult, right? Not only are you using my work without permission, but now you're pretending that this guy is the one who actually created it when I'm the one who created it. So now I'm actually really mad, right? Most of these cases, in fact, to my knowledge, all of these cases seem to get settled, so we don't have a lot of guidance. But what I can say is they get settled for a reason. That is, the artist has the right to control how that artwork is used. Now, I like to take pictures. I don't claim to be any good at it. I take pictures. I have the right to go and take a picture of your artwork or this artwork or anything else that I see around town. But if I want to use it in a commercial to sell product, that's another story. So I have the right to take a photograph. You don't have the right to keep people. You can't go, oh, no pictures allowed. You can't take a picture of my artwork that's in a public place. That's not going to happen. But you do have the right to say, you don't have the right to make money off of my artwork. So keep that in mind. And that's also true for when you're using other people's art. Think of it in terms of, okay, this is how I would feel. This is how this person felt when he saw that someone else is work, that his artwork was being used to make money for somebody else, and somebody else was assumingly getting the credit for it. Put yourself in their shoes, as they say, kind of thing. So if you want to use someone else's work, get permission again. All right. So I get this a lot, and I do joke. This is how I put my kids through college. I have one in college right now. I just paid a tuition bill, and I have a second one who's a senior in high school, so I'm about ready to get hit with another one. So this is how I put my kids through college, but I'm going to still tell you some of the secret sauce, if you will, and that is this fair use. You get this all the time about, well, Dave, isn't it fair that I use this because I'm going to use it for a festival, or I'm going to, whatever your reason. So I want to talk a little bit about fair use, and so bear with me a little bit. And when we think about whether it's fair use and we're copying, I love this kind of starting place, right? I don't think it's copying when you don't add anything to it. If you just copy it, you don't add anything to it, then there's probably not a fair use part of it. So let's start with at least that part, and we'll go through some of these cases in a really high level, hopefully without making your eyes completely glaze over. So we have a guy named Kuntz, and he made a postcard, you can see here, with these puppies in this family. And I'm sorry, that's Rogers. But Kuntz bought this postcard. He saw it, and he said, this would be an awesome sculpture. And so he sent it off to his fabricator in Italy, and there was some correspondence, and they said, well, what about the nose, and what about this? And he said, just like you see it in the postcard. Make it just like it is. What's that sound like? It sounds like we're just copying. The fact that you go from a two-dimensional to a three-dimensional, no, that's not going to help you. So the court said, no, that's no good. You didn't add anything to it. You just copied it. So now comes the next case, and the judge, and what we have here is we have an print ad on the left, and then the larger piece with the several dangling legs here is what Kuntz created. And he said, Judge, I listened to you the first time. I added something. I listened to it. And what this is saying, this is an expression about commercialism and a number of different things like that. And the judge looked at it and he said, thank you for listening. You're absolutely right. Fair use. You're making a commentary, a social commentary using these copy of these legs that are shown in here. And so the judge said, okay, we're good. So how do we tackle this one? So we've all heard of Dr. Seuss. If we haven't heard of Dr. Seuss is someone you don't want to mess with. We joke in trademark law, you don't mess with the mouse, Disney, and you don't mess with the rings, the Olympics. In copyright, we could also say the same thing about Dr. Seuss and Disney. We don't want to step on their toes because they would be very unhappy. And what we see here, the places that you will boldly go, the places you will go. And it's obviously a takeoff on Star Trek and Dr. Seuss, but you have these kind of the same characters, the same look and feel, the same type of things where if Dr. Seuss was to do a riff on on Star Trek you would expect to see. And the judge looked at this and said, you know, if we look at the purpose and all these different things here, I'm just not seeing it. This really looks like you're just lifting Dr. Seuss off. And in fact, you will go through a number of the pages of the different books and you compare them, and it just says, no, that's just not good. There's nothing that you've done. You've not really added anything. Remember when we had this first case, where the judge said, what did you add? You didn't add anything. You just basically made a straight up copy. The judge said the same thing here. You just basically made a straight up copy of the work here. And by the way, Dr. Seuss has these whole series of books that they sell for graduation and careers and things like that, and all the places that you will go. That's something that's licensing. You're taking market away from Dr. Seuss. So no good there. And then we have this case that came down a little bit earlier this spring, and just 2 days ago was amended to clarify a couple of things. But I think this will really help us as artists as well, and especially for muralists. So we have a photographer who took the black and white picture of Prince before he became Prince, or formerly known as Prince. And Vanity Fair got a license from Prince's estate. Got a license from the photographer, to basically say, we want to use this as source material. We're going to give it to an artist who's going to create one image that's going to appear a half page, and then there'll be another quarter page somewhere else in there. And that was the license. And the photographer didn't realize, I don't know if she would have cared or not, Andy Warhol was the person who Vanity Fair hired to create the artwork for. And that was okay. But then Andy Warhol went on and created a whole series of prints that is called the Prince series. There's 14 silk screens, there's some pen and pencil, or pencil and sketches, and when the photographer found out about that, she said, whoa, that's too far. And the Warhol State Foundation actually says, well, wait a minute, take a look. We did more than just copy it. This is Warholish, right? I mean, you look at it and you know Andy Warhol created this. Bold colors, it's just very dynamic, and it's a close-up portrait, just like the Marilyn Monroes and the Campbell soup cans. And the court said, just because someone would look at it and say, we know that's an Andy Warhol style, that's not enough. You really didn't add anything to it. If you look at the pictures of the black and white and then the colors, the hair's still leaning the same. Really, he's added bold colors and some shading, and that's about it. Everything else is really the same if you just kind of look at them closely. And furthermore, you've taken away the market for this person. And so, no, you're not going to get to do that. But then we have weird cases like this where the court said, yeah, that's okay. That's fair use. So that's why I joke I can put my kids through college under the fair use. But when we're looking at the fair use issues, just think about, you can't just do a direct copy. What is it that you're trying to say? Why are you using that other source material? Why are you using that other material that someone else created? And what is the message you're trying to convey with it? Is it different from what the original artist was trying to convey or not? Is it a parody, for example? Are you using it as a political commentary? Is there something different that you are adding, either in terms of your message or style? It's got to be something else. And so don't just borrow something, slap it into your mural and say, well, it's just a small piece of the mural, it's not the entire thing. There needs to be a reason. Give it some thought. And frankly, your art itself will be that much stronger if you think about, well, why is it that I'm incorporating this? What message is it using? Be very curative in your own artwork, if you will. All right, so when we put people in there, remember we had the person eating the donut. right? And then we have this guy, right? We've heard of this guy. We've seen this Clooney guy around, maybe on the streets here and there. Can we put him in our mural just because maybe we're a fan? No, we can't, right? Because he has rights of publicity. He has the right to control his name, likeness, image, to keep others from doing that, and he does, right? And that's part of how he makes his bazillion dollars. What about this guy? You may say, well, this guy isn't George Clooney. Doesn't matter. All of us have the right to control our own name, likeness, and image. If you're a festival, I encourage you to use this thing called a crowd release. I know it's a little off topic of what we're doing, but we do have the festival coming up in September, and that is just in prominent places. We want to display this, maybe even put it on our website. Hey, if you show up, we want you to show up. Just know that we're going to be taking pictures, and we're going to use this. Your image may be used for promotional purposes. We're not reselling any of that kind of stuff. What about this person? Again, she has the right to control her name, image, and likeness. And we might want to go, if we're going to use a George Clooney or someone who's that prominent, but sometimes we want to just, if there's an individual person we know or we want to use in a commercial or some print ad or something else, we're going to use a model release. Again, I know we're going a little bit off topic there, we'll get back on right now. So another way you can incorporate work without getting direct permission from someone, remember, we can ask for permission, and that's the best way. We may have a fair use that we can get it in there. And three, there's things that are in the public domain. There's copyrights that are in the public domain. You say, well, Dave, what's in the public domain? And I say, things that are really old. So things that were created in 1925 or earlier usually are free game. So, for example, The Great Gatsby. If you want to write the story that came before or after the storyline of The Great Gatsby, you can do that. If you like this artwork that was created for The Great Gatsby and you want to do a mural that honors that in some way, you could do that. You can incorporate those things that were created from quite a while ago. Now, there are some exceptions to everything, but that's a good, as they say, rule to use. So, we have recognized people. We want to make sure we get a model release. And hopefully, if we're a festival, maybe we'll be using our crowd release. And if we're going to incorporate other people's work, we can do something called, well, first, if you don't know who created the work, you can use the reverse image searching. So Google has a reverse image search. There's something called TinEye, T-I-N-E-Y-E. It's out of Canada. They're they have two different algorithms, and I encourage people to run them in both because sometimes you get nothing on one, but you get something on the other. And that'll hopefully help you identify who it is that you need to contact. Public domain, we can use those works. I've listed free sites, and I didn't know how much time we would have for questions and everything, but I'll just briefly mention free sites. If you just do a search on your computer and say free images, because you want to be inspired and you want to use some work in your artwork, read all of the terms and conditions. If you see a hyperlink, click on it, even if it doesn't say to click on it. Click on everything and read everything. Why? Because I have had clients who've gotten in terrible trouble thinking that they were using something that was listed as free, but some of the terms and conditions buried in those would say, well, you have to give credit and a hyperlink back. I don't know how you do a hyperlink back if you're painting a mural on the side of a building, and I don't know that you would want to try and figure out how to do that. It's impossible. And so they said, well, because you didn't completely do all of the terms and conditions, you're in violation of our copyright, and we're going to shake you down for a lot of money. And that seems completely unfair, and it is unfair, but that's just the way it is. So if you're using an image in your artwork that you found on the internet that says it was free, make absolutely sure that you are certain that it is free, and take screenshots of everything so that if someone was to change the terms and conditions later, you can say, at the time I borrowed it, these were the terms and conditions. You changed the terms and conditions later, that's not my problem. But you won't be able to make that argument unless you have all those screenshots. Then we have fair use. And again, remember, get whatever permission you can in writing. The fact that you and I are talking, and I may say, yeah, absolutely, go ahead and use this image that I have in your artwork. It would be a good idea for you to get my email address. Send me an email back saying, hey, it was great meeting you. Thank you very much for letting me use this image. You don't need to necessarily have a response back from me. It would be great if you had a response back to me and said, yeah, it was great meeting you too. I can't wait to see your work. That may be all the permission that you need. And that may be all that you may get. You may also be on a napkin. You may also just get it on a napkin. So, before we do finish up, we have some questions.
We have some questions.
Yay.
Can I ask them to you?
Please, I hope you will.
Melody wants to know, what about using an image of a person in a mural? Do I need permission? So she's sort of combining two of the things you were talking about.
Yeah, so Melanie, that's a great question. And it's just, there's all sorts of layers of complexity there, right? So we have an image that...
The question?
So the question was, Melody wants to know whether she can use an image that she sees on the internet that also has a recognizable person in that image. So first we want to know, can we get permission from whoever took the picture, excuse me, from whoever took the picture of Melody, and we certainly want to make sure that we have Melody's permission for that to appear. And I will tell you that sometimes, I've had one occasion where someone said no, and the reason is she was hiding, right? She did not want to be found. She was hiding for a very good reason. There was restraining orders against a person that she had some difficulties with. And if she was to all of a sudden appear very publicly, that would disrupt her life tremendously. So sometimes people may be rude when they're allowed to be rude. Sometimes they may have fantastic reasons why they're saying no. Most of the time, we just want to be asked. And most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, people are very appreciative of the fact that you asked, and they're agreeable to it. And maybe what they want is to be invited to the opening of your mural, or to be invited to see the artwork, or something small that does not require money. So not everything is going to require money. But to answer Melody's question, I would want, if I could, to get permission from whoever took the picture, which may be difficult to find, and which is why we're doing these reverse image searches, right? We want to see if we can find where this might be posted. Maybe it shows up on someone's Facebook page or some other social media, and then trying to locate the artist.
What about that person? What if it's just like a friend?
What if it's just like?
Just like your friend, and you're like, hey, I want to make a mural of my friend.
So the question is, what if it's just a mural of my friend? There's an artist that was featured fairly prominently in a national publication, I think just within this last week, and he was known for basically taking photographs of himself and his friends and family, and then making paintings from those. And he really didn't go out with he didn't approach a lot of strangers. He really kept it within a very close group of people. He would ask permission from every one of those, and you should ask permission. And again, I would like that in writing of some form. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out contract. It could be what we showed on the slides before, of just a back-and-forth conversation through email or social media.
Two more questions.
Please.
And they're all along the same line. So similarly, and we've touched on this a little bit, other recognizable things like song lyrics. You already touched a little bit on celebrities, but other recognizable things.
Yeah, so if we include other recognizable things, so let's say we get...
Like song lyrics.
Yeah, so we get some song lyrics, say we're a Beatles fan, and we pull out some prominent part of the song. And what the courts a lot of times will say, even if you took just a little bit, if it's the heart of what people recognize, so if I was to do who's on first, what's on second, I don't know who's on third. right? We know that's part of a larger piece. And actually that little piece is part of a small old-time movie. And so it's an even smaller part of them. But what the courts will say is, you've taken really the heart of the copyright. And and certainly the more prominent it is, the more difficult it could be for you if you go forward without getting permission. It's hard to say, too. So, for example, if you're a big fan of former Justice Ginsburg, you can walk around town and see all sorts of images of her. You can buy all sorts of stuff that portray Justice Ginsburg. And her husband, or her husband's estate, or her estate, is not going to come after you. They could if they wanted to, but they're not going to. If you're taking something, John Lennon, or Paul McCarthy, or Ringo Starr, you may not have that same luxury. In fact, the more prominent they are, like I joked about, don't mess with the mouse, we're talking about Disney, can be very litigious. In other words, they're very they don't mind dragging people into court. And the same thing with the Beatles and some other folks. So also know what it is that you're pulling, and do you really need it? Again, that's why I say be a very good curator of what you're including in your own art. What is it adding? Why do you need it? And maybe it's a fair use. Maybe you can incorporate that in there. But just be very mindful of why you're using that.
2 more questions.
Yes.
I love that.
I love them. I love the questions.
Thank you for asking questions. This person, Melody, is also asking, what about using another person's artwork in order to honor or celebrate their art? And what about giving them credit?
So,
Credit.
So Melody is asking, what if I want to use a piece of art to honor that artwork and I give the artist credit? If that artwork is from 1925 or earlier, you're probably fine. So if you like Picasso, for example, or the Scream, and you're basing it off of the original and not a reproduction of those, you're probably okay. If Wizard of Oz, if you're using some artwork that was in the original Wizard of Oz book, not the movie, then you're probably okay. If you're using something from the movie, which has its own separate copyright, you may have a problem. In fact, you probably will have a problem. The fact that you give the artist credit doesn't get you off the hook for copyright. If you're in college or high school, then you're not, the teacher's not going to ding you for plagiarism, right? Because you've given credit where you should give credit. But you still need permission from the artist if it was, say, created last year or any time after 1925. You really do need to approach whoever created that and say, I love your work, I'm a big fan, I'd like to honor it in this way.
All right. Along those lines, what if the artist is a minor? Would it be the guardian who signs a contract, but the youth is credited, or would that be negotiated by the guardian? I'm sure there's other issues with working with minors as artists as well as public subjects.
So if we want to use an image of someone who's a minor, so, in most states it's 18 or younger, or under 18, excuse me. You'll have to consult your own state by state, but let's go with 18 or under 18 years old to define who a minor is. You want the guardian, whoever that may be. Usually it's mom or dad, maybe it's somebody else, maybe it's grandmother, maybe it's stepmother, to be able to assign that. So for example, for a nonprofit that I'm involved with, if we take pictures of a minor, we do go approach mom and dad and ask them permission before we take the picture of them. And sometimes we'll even ask that they'll sign a release just for that. Even if we have this crowdsource other issues, because there's nothing that will get people angrier in a hurry than dealing with someone's kid or their pets. Not to equate the two, but certainly in Colorado, the person's kid or their pets will get them very angry all very quickly. But minors can't sign contracts. They can sign a contract, but they can walk away from the contract. So if you're ever dealing with a minor who might control some rights that you want to use, or just dealing with a minor at all, you need the guardian to sign that contract as well. Because otherwise, they could just say, I know we signed the contract, but I'm not interested in doing that anymore. Once they turn majority of age, then they certainly can sign a contract and it's enforceable just like everywhere else. Yes, please.
Two questions.
Please.
So the first one, you said don't mess with the mouse.
Yes.
So my example was from college. There was a student artist who created sweatshirts for everyone on the floor in the dormitory, but they used characters from Warner Brothers. So Bugs Bunny, Donald Duck, etc. So because it was original art that they created out of the characters, not that Warner Brothers would have gone after the student artist for a few sweatshirts, is that an issue because it was original art that they made, or because these characters, they just can't replicate these characters at all?
Right. So it's a great question. And the question was, all right, so back just a year ago, when she was in college, she created these sweatshirts that had Warner Brothers characters on them, hypothetically. It wasn't Warner Brothers. We're just using that completely as a hypothetical. And they were original art. They weren't just, hey, we found a picture in a book and we photocopied it and then we somehow heat pressed it onto the sweatshirt itself. The person actually created their own version of that character. And I would say you're absolutely right. If in our hypothetical, Warner Brothers isn't really going to care. Right? If we start selling these things on the internet, now Warner Brothers is going to care. But if we're being very cautious about it, Warner Brothers absolutely could say, no, you don't get to use that original art on the sweatshirts, because only we are allowed to make different versions of Bugs Bunny, for example, or Tweety Bug, or Tweety Bird. How about that one? Hey, Warner Brothers, if you're listening, and the next character is Tweety Bug, I want to hear about it. Tweety Bird, they are among their exclusive rights. They can keep other people from recreating those things. They also get to have the exclusive right to make what's called derivative works, which is really just different versions of that same piece of artwork. Does that help?
Yes. My second question
Yes.
goes back to what you were talking about earlier related to property and the borrow rights. And so let's say a mural artist is hired by the building owner to create a mural on the side of the building. And so they sell the building. And so are you saying in that case, if they want to paint over, do anything, the new owner has to contact the artist? Is that what you were saying, just to clarify?
Yeah. So the question was, under VARA, if I'm a building owner, for example, and I allowed you to put some artwork on here, and now either I'm selling the building or I've just changed my mind and I don't want the artwork on there, as a building owner, am I stuck? And if I meet the requirements of VARA, so it has to be limited, not for ads or promotion. I also, as an artist, I have to be of some recognizable stature. So if I'm brand new, I may not qualify for this yet, but even if I'm new at the game, if you will, if I can get an expert to say, you know what, this is an original piece of art that's just doing something different than nobody else, and it's really powerful. This is, I get somebody to say, yes, this person should be recognized as somebody of some sort of stature. Then under VARA, the building owner is stuck with the artwork unless they can negotiate something. And that's why almost always as a building owner, you're going to have a VARA right. If I'm representing, a VARA waiver. If I'm representing a building owner, I'm always going to say, you need a waiver. if I'm a municipality and I allow works to be put on there, I'm absolutely saying I have the right to do whatever I want with this thing. And that's why, as an artist, we just need to recognize, okay, I may not have the right to say, no, you don't get to remove it, but there are certain rights I do care about, and so I'm going to add them back into the contract. So I may say, well, yes, you get to paint over it, but I get to remove it if I can remove it in some way without damaging the building, or maybe there's some other thing that we want to do together. Especially, again, sometimes the buildings are just going to get knocked over. We had one artist where that was the issue, where the building was just going to be flattened, just going to be removed. And so basically we went to the building owner and said, we want the wall. We want the wall that has this, and we'll pay for it, and we'll take it apart and put it together somewhere else. And the building owner's fine with that, right? It's less for them to do as long as we don't screw up their construction schedule and we can do this on time. And it all worked out just fine.
So follow-up question.
Yes.
We've heard from an artist who, has been painting murals for many, many years. And I don't know how long Vara has existed, but has talked about their murals being taken down on public, like on a side of a highway, overpass, for example. And so is it any different with government or municipal facilities, or it's the same thing? And what if they created a pre-VARA agreement and they just tear it down?
So if it was put up before VARA came into being, they're not going to have those rights. So the reason this all happened was Europe has much stronger version of VARA rights than what I just discussed. But under certain treaties, we had to at least agree to this in the United States. And I apologize very much. I don't remember when it happened. I want to say 1990 is when this happened. And so let's just, if I'm right, in this, the work that you talked about that was put up on a highway, on the side of a highway, hopefully with permission, happened before 1990, then they're out of luck. If it happened after 1990, they probably have something to talk about. But again, they still have to be an artist of some recognized stature, if you will. And I will say, in some of those cases that I described, one of the courts, I think, made a helpful point. We all know that most graffiti art, for example, is temporary. It's going to get painted over. There's this wall, I think I have a picture. I apologize to the person downstairs. We're really going. So this is actually a flood wall in St. Louis. And there is this expectation that people are going to let the artwork stay up for some period of time, but maybe within a week, everything's going to be different. And the fact that it's temporary in nature doesn't change the analysis for VARA. But if there's the expectation that it's going to get painted over, you really can't complain about it getting painted over, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
You mentioned municipalities, and I know we have at least one, if not two people watching right now who work for local government and probably work with public artists. So I'm just curious what kind of advice you would have for them as the ones contracting with artists for things like murals.
So the question is, there's people online here who represent municipalities, and what kind of advice do we have for them? And I will say, for example, I worked with a municipal commission for several years, and I served on their board, and one of the things that, and we're a fairly large city, and one of the things that we required always was a VARA waiver. But again, we would sit down with the artists and say, look, just so you know, this is what you're giving up, and what is it, does that trouble you in any way? And if it does, let's have that conversation about what it is we might be able to do. So for example, in this particular city, this was before my time as far as when the artwork came up, there was public art that was put in a location that later became controversial as to where the artwork and where it was, the particular location. So in order to diffuse some of the controversy, the idea was, well, let's just move the sculpture. Well, that had to be a negotiation, a discussion with the artist as to where that would be, where the artist would still feel comfortable that it's still a prominent place, and still allow that message that the artist wanted to get across. And so that is something that, as a municipality, I would certainly say you need to have a VAR waiver. If you don't put one in there, if for no other reason, you may need to move a piece of artwork later. That may seem completely benign at the time, and then a year later, just look at what's happened in the last couple of years in the United States, the conversations that we've had on a broader level. The conversations have always been had, but these are conversations that are in the daily newspapers, and so maybe that wasn't something that wasn't an issue, but now it is an issue, and now you need to address it. Maybe it's just not something that was thought about before. And if you're a municipality, you also want to talk about repair work. That's always true of any kind of public art. Make sure that when you're saying, okay, we have X number of dollars to budget for this piece of work, that there is some reserve that you have to repair public art. Lightning happens, rain happens, hail happens, graffiti happens, which is kind of ironic from what we're talking about. But so this public art is, even if it's fabricated in a way that we think it's just going to last forever, is never going to last forever. And so we need to make sure that we're saving some money in reserve. And two, we're having a discussion with the artist as to how that is going to get repaired. Is the artist going to get paid to repair it? Are they going to get the right of first refusal, if you will? Which is usually the case. We approach the artist and say, we need some work done. We would like you to do it. This is how much money we have for you to do it. Can you do it for this amount of money? And if the artist either says, I don't want to do it, or I can't do it for that amount of money, then we go to somebody else. But we also are always having a provision in our contract about what are we going to do when we need to touch up, repair, fix, or frankly, remove artwork. Any other questions? Let me just, if you think of something else, let me just do this real quickly here. And it's maybe a little hokey, but that's just who I am. I'm a little hokey about it. So this is from Dr. Seuss, and I thought since we talked about all the places you would go, I'd pull a little piece of that from Dr. Seuss. We're talking about copyrights and your rights to use different things in murals. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with so many strange words and words as you go. So be sure when you step with great care and great tact. And remember that copyright's a great balancing act. Never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot from your left. And will you succeed? Yes, you will. You will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. So this is me. If you have just general questions, you're not going to ask me anything real specific. I'm always happy to just talk to you about very general things. If you have a very specific project, then you should turn to Colorado Attorneys for the Arts and have them set you up, and they'll pair you with a lawyer and help you on your way. Thank you very much.
I'll pop back up. Thank you guys. Thank you for watching tonight. I know we got started a little late, but we did record tonight's presentation, and we'll make that available afterwards. So thank you. Round of applause here. I'll do it here in the space. To Dave for sharing this information. Thank you to the People's Building for hosting and live streaming for us. Keep an eye on for the Colfax Canvas Mural Festival, September 3rd, 4th, and 5th, coming up around the corner. And please keep in touch with us at CBCA. We are here to help. Have a good night.